So, like I mentioned, the first thing I do is set my upper back. And for me, the easiest way to do this is by actually putting my feet up on the bench, because that allows me to flatten out that lower back. Remember, we talked about how you don't want to be arching your lower back. Feet up on the bench is going to more or less prevent that. So I start here, and then I'm going to try to arch my upper back. And I do that by picking myself up and using the bar to push myself down. Just like in the squat where I'm using the bar to pull my lats down, I'm doing the exact same thing in the bench press. So I set my upper back exactly like I would in the squat, pulling down on the bar, and then thinking, once I get my grip, I'm gonna think about pulling the bar apart, just like in the bench press. Just like in the squat, excuse me. Now for my grip, I prefer a more balanced grip. So I prefer something that's gonna distribute the load equally across my chest and my triceps. You don't need to distribute the load equally, you need to make sure that you're using your muscles efficiently. So if you have huge arms and super strong triceps, and you feel better with a closer grip that's putting more emphasis on your triceps, that's perfectly fine. If you got really small arms and a small range of motion, you want a super wide grip, that's fine too, as long as it doesn't stress anything, doesn't cause any pain. I think most people are gonna be better off with kind of a more moderate grip. And for me, I start out, I put my thumb just a little bit away from the edge of the knurling, right? The knurling is the sharp part of the bar. And that's about the right grip for me. Again, you'll be different based on your leverages. I have fairly long arms, and so my moderate grip is a lot wider than a lot of people's. But as long as you're comfortable, probably gonna be the most important thing. Something doesn't feel right, hurting your elbows, hurting your shoulders, play with your grip, adjust your grip until you find something that is comfortable. So, set my upper back, find my grip. From there, deep breath into the chest, and now I have to find my foot position. So for a lot of people, the best foot position is going to be where your heels are directly underneath your hips. Because remember, you're transferring the power from your feet, from your lower body to the bar. And so the more stacked you can get, the more you can get those muscle groups aligned, the better that transfer is going to be. Some people, though, really struggle with shooting their butt up in the air when they're bench pressing. And that's because when you do that, you're really shortening the range of motion, and so it's going to make the lift feel easier, but also usually not safe, going to put a little bit too much stress on your lower back, and you look really silly, and if you compete, it's not legal. So in a competition, your lift won't count if you pick your butt up. That might not matter to y'all, but the other reasons should. You want to keep your butt flat on the bench, and if you really struggle to do that when your heels are in close to your hips, you might benefit by just moving your feet out a little bit. With your feet in front of your hips like that, it's going to be very difficult to pick your butt up off the bench. You might lose a little bit of strength, a little bit more of the power transfer from your feet, but you won't lose a whole lot. So the whole setup looks like this. Okay. Now when I unrack the bar, just like in the squat, I don't want to have any inefficient movement, right? I don't want to be doing more than I actually have to. You'll see a lot of people get set up to bench press and they'll do half the bar on the rack. First of all, it's going to exhaust you. Second of all, it's going to be very difficult to maintain that tightness you just built in your upper back if you're doing half a rep and moving your arm forward to get out of the rack. Instead, you just want to pull this out of the rack as little as possible, just enough to get over these hooks. And actually, you can think about scraping the bar against the hooks, pulling them against the hooks, and that'll help you to make sure that you're doing it efficiently. You won't be picking it up too much, and it's going to keep your upper back tight. So I'm just barely going to pull the bar out of the rack, and I'm going to position it so that it's directly over kind of my sternum, right the center of my chest. And then as I descend, I'm really thinking just about keeping everything tight, right? So I'm pulling the bar apart to keep that upper back tight. I'm really thinking about squeezing my arms as I go down, and I'm thinking about driving my heels in the ground to keep that lower body tight. And if I do that, by the time I get to my chest, I built all this power. It's almost like a spring, right? You've coiled up all this energy. And so you're going to be in a very good position to then press up without having to think about it too much. You'll hear a lot of people talk about the bar path, right? Should I press straight up or should I press back? And you'll have a lot of people talk about, well, how fast should I pause off my chest? Should I not? If you do the descent properly, it really won't make a difference. You'll naturally find that correct bar path if you have your elbows in the right position, which we'll talk about in a second. And you'll be just as strong if you pause on your chest versus if you just touch your chest very quickly and then go back up. You do not want to bounce the bar on your chest. You don't want to just drop it. We talked about this in the squat, how some people can stay tight even if they just drop it. In the bench, you can actually hurt yourself like that, dropping a big heavy weight on your chest. So don't do that. So I'll show you how it all looks, and then we'll talk about a little bit variations, how you can move your grip, how you can move your elbows to shift the emphasis in the exercise. But here's how it looks all put together. So that was just kind of my standard bench press. If I want to shift the emphasis, if I want to put a little bit more emphasis on my triceps, I can move my hands closer together. That's not really going to change anything in how my bench press looks. But if I want to put a little bit more emphasis on my pecs, I can let my shoulders flare out more. Again, this is usually going to put a little bit more stress on your shoulders, and so you have to use it carefully, but that's okay. As long as you make sure that you're not pushing through pain, the more that you internally rotate, the more that you move your elbows in like this and away from your body, and your hands towards your body, the more you're gonna be recruiting pec. So if you're very weak off your chest, if you really struggle, you can lock out almost anything, but right off the chest, man, it just feels like you're pressing into a wall. You might wanna play around with a little bit more elbow internal rotation around your elbows, letting your elbows come around, out from your body, and putting more emphasis on your chest. It shouldn't make any other difference. Just like moving your arms in, shouldn't make any difference in how your bench press looks, but it'll shift the emphasis from one muscle group to another, and depending on your strengths and weaknesses, that might be really helpful. Again, no matter what you do, be careful. Don't push through pain. Pulling in your grip, that might put a little bit more stress on your elbows. Flaring your elbows out, that might put a little bit more stress on your shoulders, so just be cognizant of all those different options. Most important thing is that you're using your muscles effectively in a way that's safe for you over the long term.